following podcast is sponsored by Robots vs. Dinosaurs. I'm your host, Louis G.
Disclaimer, this podcast is about to spoil several movies from 6 to 20 years old. Lou, read off the list.
Today, Robots vs. Dinosaurs will be spoiling for you, the listener, Big Hero 6, Terminator 2, Back to the Future, Tommy Boy, the Indiana Jones series, and DC's Shazam.
Breakfast at Tiffany's, Casablanca.
Hello and welcome to Robots vs. Dinosaurs, a podcast where we watch a movie every week and try to determine which one is cooler, robots or dinosaurs. With me, as always, is a new co-host every week. In today's episode, I have my very, very good friend, Gina Scarpa, professional voiceover artist, with me. Say hello, Gina.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. Gina, why don't you tell us the movie that we're going to be talking about this week?
I chose the Disney film Big Hero 6 so that we could talk about Baymax.
All right, and who is Baymax?
Baymax is a robot created by Hiro, the main character's brother Tadashi. He's an inflatable healthcare robot. He and Hiro work together throughout the movie to avenge Tadashi's death.
Excellent. I think that's a really good explanation of who Baymax is, and also just a pretty good summary of the plot itself. So this podcast, it's a project that I wanted to do to explore sci-fi through a certain lens that I've noticed certain trends in sci-fi.
Yeah.
I've always been a fan of sci-fi my entire life. Actually, let me ask you this, because you are somebody that knows me really well, even though we haven't caught up in a while.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to guess what are my two favorite movies, or two of my favorite movies, what would you say?
I know one of them. One of them is
What's
for
one of them?
sure Jurassic Park, because
Okay.
you saw the films like half a dozen times in the movie theater. I don't know what your other favorite one is. It must involve a robot.
Absolutely. It's Terminator 2.
Do you know I've never seen the Terminator movies? Embarrassing.
Oh, man.
I need to get on
That's-
that.
No judgments. I mean, you know,
Thanks.
you don't have to watch every movie.
Kick me right off the podcast. It's over. This episode ends.
Terminator 2 is also one of my favorite movies of all time. But yeah, I think anybody that knows me knows that I love Jurassic Park.
Mhm.
And that's a movie, we're not reviewing that movie today, but we will sometime in the future.
Mhm.
But that's a movie that really illustrates something that comes up a lot in sci-fi, which is the intersection of nature and technology, and
Mhm.
often where they clash. So that movie in particular shows dinosaurs as something that's really cool and awe-inspiring at the very beginning.
Mhm.
Towards the end of the movie, though, it becomes the big scary thing that everyone's running away from.
Right.
And that tends to be a trend in robot movies as well. Terminator, it starts out being scary.
Yeah,
but,
right from the jump.
but I would actually argue there are a lot of scenes where they make it look awesome. Like Terminator 2, there's a scene where at the beginning, Arnold gets into a bar fight with a bunch of biker dudes.
Mhm.
And it ends with him like taking like a leather jacket and sunglasses and putting them on as he walks out, like after having beat up all these dudes. So it's like this really cool, like hero shot of the
Right.
robot. Like,
Yeah.
doing something Mel Gibson would do in a Lethal Weapon movie.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, I just wanted to explore that and sort of explore like, why do we use these tropes, and why, and what do they say about the overall message of the movie or whatever piece of fiction? What are we trying to say about technology? What are we trying to say about modern life, maybe? I guess we'll just sort of see where that discussion goes.
Yeah.
But I thought it would be an interesting place to start.
Okay, so when Hiro first discovers Baymax, it was programmed by Tadashi. So even though Baymax is a computer program, he also has characteristics, it seems, of Tadashi as well. Tadashi is a person who puts other people first. He's someone who cares for others. In the film, if you haven't seen it, sorry, spoilers, but there's a big explosion at his school, and Tadashi runs in heroically to save his professor. And so, when we meet Baymax, we can sort of see those parallels between him and Tadashi. And throughout the movie, Hiro, at times tries to fight against that and turn Baymax into something that he wasn't even programmed to do.
That, I think, is a really interesting point, that Baymax goes through a major transformation in the movie. You can figure out who the protagonist is, or I should say it's a good protagonist if they go through some sort of major change in the movie. And Hero's the obvious one, but if you follow Baymax throughout the film, he very drastically transforms from his original purpose into purpose that he, I would argue, finds through his friendship with Hero. But part of that journey is definitely Hero sort of repurposing him, just being better in combat and like all this stuff that he really wasn't ever meant for. But Hero just has this sort of naive outlook on what a robot should be or what Baymax should be.
Right. And that's
kind of
because in the film, Hero is 14 years old. He graduated from high school at 13, and he's been spending all of his free time bot fighting, which is illegal in San Fran, Tokyo. And so, I mean, that's what a great name. And so that's what he knows how to do. And that's what he was good at. We see in the opening of the film, he goes bot fighting and he takes on this really big opponent who is crushing everybody. And then Hero kind of sandbags him and takes his money. And so, this is what he knew how to do. And when Tadashi dies, I feel like Hero was falling back on the things that he knew he was good at. And he was also laser focused on vengeance and not really thinking about the big picture of who Baymax was. And you also mentioned about Baymax's transformation. And I feel like we see that pretty early in the movie too, because Baymax asks Hero where he's hurting. And Hero says that he is hurting. Baymax says, I don't see anything in my scan. And Hero says it's a different kind of hurt. And Baymax immediately downloads new data into his system to learn what emotional hurt means.
So one thing you mentioned was that bot brawl at the beginning, the underground robot fighting. That was part of Spider-Man's origin as well. We're going to come back to that. San Francisco, what year is this? And also, where geographically is San Francisco? Is it on the west coast of America or is it on the east coast of Japan?
Do you know the answer to this or are you just asking me?
I do not know the answer.
I don't know the answer either.
I'm asking you based on like your viewing of the movie and the culture that we saw in San Francisco, which is, I think, really very well realized for this film.
No, it's such a great mashup of what you would expect on the west coast of the United States and what you might expect if you visited Tokyo. So I wonder if that was almost their point. Like you really couldn't say definitively one way or the other. I mean, we're definitely in the future for this movie. Part of me felt like originally we were here in the United States, but now that I think about it, I don't really know. Maybe we are in Japan. This is a hard question. Wait, this is a really hard question to answer. I mean, oh no, we're not at this. I have a fact for you, but that's for later. And then I wonder if that helps me determine the answer.
Let me ask you this. Is your fact that this movie is based on a comic book?
Maybe.
Well, because
there's no way you don't know that, but I thought
that's
since it's set in Japan, right? Since the comic was set in Japan, I thought maybe, right? And there's a crossover with Spider-Man. Maybe you really are proving this theory.
Hey, it's a Marvel comic, Big Hero 6. I did some research on that because I actually didn't even know that until literally last night because I had some questions about it. So I just did some like flash research last night on it. Found out that the comic started in 1998. It definitely does take place in Japan. And Big Hero 6 is a team that has gone through, I think, 3 iterations at this point.
Yes.
So the team that we see in this movie is the 3rd iteration, which has 1 or 2 of the original members. But did you get into what Baymax looked like in the comics and like what his character is versus what it is in the movie? I really want to unpack that.
I was looking at that and I was like, wow, he is basically a dinosaur. And It was very interesting to see what the comic was like versus what the movie ended up being. I mean, I know that originally 2 of the members, Sunfire and Silver Samurai, they couldn't get the rights to them for the movie, but then you can see iterations of them in other characters like Wasabi and Fred and even in Baymax as well. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I mean, reading this, I was like, wow, I never knew that this was a Marvel comic. I didn't know that there was a crossover with Spider-Man. There were so many interesting things about it. And I love how they adapted it to make it family-friendly, funny kids movie because the comic doesn't seem that funny based on the premise. It seems pretty serious.
I think a lot of comics in general were more serious in the late 90s than they are today. And I would actually say the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which was being built around the time of this film, this was 2014. And that's right in the middle of the MCU really starting to ramp things up, roll out a lot of sequels. And and this is technically part of their cinematic universe. That not only changed the tone of superhero movies, but it also changed the tone of comics themselves. Comics, in order to catch up with, or I guess cater to the audience that is seeing all of these Marvel movies in theaters, is starting to match its tone and be more jokey and lighthearted and campy compared to how it was in like the gritty dark neon late 90s, you know?
Oh, that's interesting. I did not know
Yeah.
this.
Well, I wouldn't say it's a fact. It's more like my observation as one comic book fan. I do love that this is an official Marvel movie, and these are official Marvel characters.
Yeah.
I really do. We're going to spend some time talking about each of the characters because I have a lot to say about not only the characters, but like all of the voice actors. I pride myself on knowing or recognizing voice actors when I hear them. I'm always delighted when I can't guess it, or when I don't even think about it, and then I look it up later, and it's like, oh, that was Scott Adsit.
Was there one that you recognized the most? Because there were some, as soon as they talked, I was like, ooh, I know exactly who that is.
TJ Miller.
Yeah, me too. The minute TJ
recognizable
Miller
voice.
opened his voice, and also Damon Wayans Jr., I was like, okay, I know, as Wasabi. But some of them, it took me, the one that got me was Maya Rudolph as Aunt Cass.
Yep.
I don't know why I was like, who is that? But I followed Maya Rudolph's work and stuff, and I don't know. It just caught me off guard. Great when you can like recognize the voices right away.
So the first question is, what is a robot? Alternatively, it's what is a dinosaur? But we're going to unpack both of those questions. But because this movie clearly features robots more so than dinosaurs, if dinosaurs at all, we're going to start with what is a robot?
Okay, my definition of a robot is a machine with computer functions that can do some sort of human task, maybe.
Oh, okay.
What's your definition of a robot?
So I don't have one definition of a robot. I feel like it's always stretching the limits of what could a robot be. Anytime I see a new design of a robot, it often really opens my eyes to like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that as a robot. What's interesting is that part of your answer was that it does human tasks. And I think that the intent of robots, especially when we're looking at them in sci-fi, the intent is always that they are either going to replace us or that they are going to become self-aware and get rid of us violently. Or alternatively, Wall-E really went into this. They're going to basically become superior to us and make us their pets. In this movie, which of those three categories, let's say, let's limit it to three. There's much broader categories. I'm sure I'll get like comments on that, but let's just limit it to those three categories of robots. One that's built for doing human tasks so that we don't have to. One that is aggressive towards us because we've mistreated it and gets rid of us, or one that more or less makes us its pets.
I mean, I feel like it's the first and the second one, right? Because Baymax himself is meant to, take care of us, but is replacing what doctors and nurses would be doing, right? But then also in the film are the microbots, and those are built to they were meant to help with architecture and all kinds of things, but they were used, in order to destroy. So if we're just talking about Baymax, I will go with the first one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Baymax almost represents the automated kiosks that you see in like pharmacies and places now that a lot of people are upset about. And a lot of people say, they're putting humans out of jobs. I guess the counter argument to that is it's creating jobs for technicians or people that operate or install the devices. But I'm going to do my best to avoid getting actually political on this podcast. But I do I like talking about like just, society and more or less how society is changing.
Yeah.
Both in response to pop culture and also how pop culture comments on it. So I think a good way to approach this from a non-political standpoint is in your observation of this movie, in your viewing of this movie, what is its stance on, are robots replacing us? Are robots going to replace doctors? Is like Baymax going to be a factory produced kind of thing that will put doctors out of a job? Or is it more of a like supplemental helper for healthcare professionals?
I think that when Tadashi was creating it, I think he was looking at it as supplemental to the healthcare. I don't think Tadashi was trying to take out the healthcare industry in this Disney Pixar movie, but I feel like he was underestimating should that technology get into the wrong hands, as we see with the microbots in the film, how people can take something that is intended to be good and it can have negative or more serious consequences. I don't think that he would want to replace the doctors and nurses, but I could certainly see, maybe a technical firm, wanting to use it in that way.
Totally agree with your point that I don't think that was Tadashi's intention ever, was to bring down the healthcare industry single-handedly
Right.
or automate it
No.
or take humanity out of it by any
Mhm.
means. I would actually argue that everything about Baymax's design is very much focused on keeping humanity in the healthcare system, right?
Mhm.
And there's a few really fascinating things while we're still on the subject of what is a robot about Baymax's design that I think are genius. One is the vinyl exoskeleton. Just that alone, and the way that it gives him like this very huggable body. At one point, Hiro comments that when he puts him in all of his armor for the first time, that he still has this sort of like belly, and he comments on it and says that, you got to get rid of it. But that really made me think the second time I was watching it, why did Tadashi deliberately design it to have a huge overhanging belly?
Right. No, right. He wanted it to be, not just comforting in the service it could provide, but just, I think, in its presence. And, we see Baymax hugging Hiro throughout the film, too. And I just feel like everything about him just screams comfort and care. And I feel like that's not something to be afraid of either, because I think a lot of times when technology changes, people, especially, I don't know, maybe older people are scared of that technology and scared of that change. And Baymax is so unassuming looking and so adorable in a lot of ways that I feel like someone who might be skeptical to what Baymax could do might be a little bit more open to the care as well. He just doesn't come across as threatening at all. It's Hiro who's trying to make him threatening.
It is. One of the first things Hiro says to him, or actually doesn't even say to him, he says, literally while walking behind his back, he says to his brother, "It looks like a walking marshmallow. No offense." And Baymax replies, "I am a robot. I cannot be offended." And that comes back later on when Hiro upgrades his armor and says, "You look sick." And Baymax replies, "I cannot be sick. I am a robot." And I noticed that that's a trend with Baymax's personality, is that he is even. He's never judgmental. Actually, I don't even know if it's right for me to keep saying he. Do they call him he? Do they use that pronoun in the movie?
That's a good question.
It's something I wasn't thinking about while I was
but I
watching
didn't really think about it either.
I feel like I'm remembering Hiro saying he, him.
Yeah, he
and,
looks like a
referring
giant marshmallow, right?
Oh,
whatever
I
he
just
says.
quote. Yes, you're right.
Right?
All right.
There we go. I'm like, we did it,
Yep,
right?
there it is. I literally had written it down. So yeah, his voice is the wonderful Scott Adsit, and he just performs it. Like I said, just very even keeled. He's always just giving information or answering a question. He's never snarky. He's never frustration about anything. There's this recurring joke throughout the movie, like whenever he's waddling towards something, and there's like a piece of furniture in his way, he just very gently stops, picks it up, or bumps into it, and like puts it like they spend so much time on little visual gags like that it really humanizes him. I think.
And what does he say next?
I am not fast.
I am not fast. I wonder if here's a fact. I don't know if you knew this, but when the animators were creating Baymax, they wanted his walk to look like penguins. They wanted him to have a waddle, or they wanted him to look like a toddler in diapers. And they were calling it animation instead of animation because they were saying he has such restricted movement compared to everything else in the film based on these two things. But once I realized that he was based on a penguin, I liked him even more, since penguins are my favorite animals. But it's so funny when you look at the little waddle, you're like, yes, it is based on a penguin.
That is something I didn't know about this movie. And that is a great trivia. Yeah.
I'm the winner.
It adds so much to his charm. In that same scene when they're escaping the factory, and he's like, "I'm not fast." They get to this door, and Hiro says, "Kick it," and he does. He tries.
Oh, it's so funny, and it's terrible.
Bounces right off.
Yeah,
and it even like makes a little squeak.
It is so funny. Yeah, I mean, you can really see that he's not meant for any kind of fighting situation or protecting situation. Not really, until Hiro puts the chip in to turn him into like a super mega fighting robot.
Mm-hmm. I feel like we have answered, at least in terms of what this movie is concerned with, what is a robot? Well, maybe not, because there's other robots that we see in the movie. A lot of other designs of robots, actually. What would you say is, like, besides Baymax, the second most iconic robot design in this film?
Probably the I don't know. I mean, the microbots or the first iteration of Hero using the microbots in the beginning of the film, which is the little, like, kind of looks like a little doll thing that he fights with.
Yeah, the microbots are super interesting because that seems to be the future of robotics itself. Is, we're sort of moving away from this conventional humanoid design, this classic C-3PO sort of robot design. And the future of robotics seems to be more like, well, why aren't we imagining things that a human can't do and designing robots to do that? Because, that's sort of the inspiration for robots like the Mars rover, for example. And a lot of the military robots that are being built are sort of built like gazelles or with like a dog-like structure instead of a human bipedal structure, which is usually very inefficient.
Oh, like the dog robot that opens the door. I've seen that video. That's so creepy. I don't like that. I don't like that.
Yeah.
Did you know that the microbots were designed to look like ants moving? And once I realized that too, I was like, whoa.
I didn't, but that makes sense. And it reminds me now of every movie where I've seen, like in The Mummy, where somebody gets assaulted by just scarab beetles until they eat all their skin off. Or like there's an Indiana Jones movie where somebody gets caught in like a mound of killer bullet ants.
Yes, and they just wanted the microbots to look like a swarm of insects, around you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's interesting that you don't want a robot that doesn't have a humanoid. Is it that it doesn't have a humanoid form or that it has a creepy dog form?
No, I just don't want it to open the door. I think that's so scary. I'm like, don't come in here. Yeah, I mean, just the fact that it can do something. I'm sure that I'm sure that the dog robot that opens doors is probably built with good intentions. But to me, it feels like I'm so going to get stuck in like iRobot or something where they're going to be hunting us down or something. When I see that, it scares me. If I had a Baymax in my life, I'd be thrilled.
But I do think that like in the future that will, that I think this movie really touched on something that you articulated really well, which is that we need to keep humanity in mind when we're designing robots that will interact with humans. We don't want people to be visually terrified of them on sight. Right. And I wonder if that's something that robots are aware of when they inevitably start to replicate and design themselves.
Like as they become self-aware?
Oh yeah.
Oh, God.
I wonder if they're gonna care about like how much they intimidate us with their appearance.
This whole premise is so terrifying to me. Oh my God, it's like my worst nightmare.
I also wrote down Baymax could be the name of Beyonce's greatest hits album.
What does this mean?
I don't know. But let's move on to what is a dinosaur? This movie, I don't think answers that question.
Right.
But let's just spend like a minute or two on that. Gina, what is a dinosaur?
A reptile, right?
Okay.
Is it? Are they all reptiles?
They're theoretically more closely related to birds than reptiles, but sure. Their name means,
they're mammals.
Their name means lizard. So scientists originally believed that they were reptiles, but they're like more of like the missing link between reptiles and birds is probably how I would describe them.
Ancient reptile birds. That's what I got.
Okay. Does this movie have any dinosaurs in it?
No, but Fred is a dragon, and that's...
I was hoping you were going to say Fred.
Fred is one of the best characters in the film.
Yes.
Yeah, so I guess that's a close thing. And in the comic, Baymax also can like transform into a dragon, which is close.
Yeah, Baymax transforms into like a big scaly, like lizardy dragon thing. Fred in the comics can summon this giant dinosaur-ish lizard-looking thing. The theme is in the movie. The theme of dinosaurs or scaly reptiles is in this movie.
Yes, scaly reptiles are definitely on this.
At best.
Yes.
So one thing that we're going to come to later at the end of the podcast is we're going to determine whether this movie is a point for or against robots. And I think we're going to say that it is not going to be a point for or against dinosaurs in any way because it's really unfair to judge them by this movie. We can only use this movie to judge robots.
Agreed.
So far, in my opinion, robots are up in this film.
Yes.
But let's talk about Fred, and let's use that to lead into the rest of the Big Hero 6 team.
Okay. So Fred is a friend of Tadashi's, and Hero meets all of Tadashi's friends when he goes to visit school. It's the San Francisco Institute of Technology. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it definitely has that
Did I
like
do it?
movie science institute name, whatever it is. Yeah.
So he meets Fred. Fred is an amazing character. And Fred is not a student at the school, but he is the school mascot. And he's super into science, and he wants his friends to invent things that are literally not possible. And then we later find out in the film that Fred is filthy rich and lives in a giant mansion, and his room is like a nerd's paradise. And then Fred eventually, when they all become their superhero selves, becomes a dragon, which is also the school mascot.
I think Honey Lemon, I think he gets her to upgrade his mascot suit so that it can breathe fire and jump long distances. Yeah. There's I don't think there's any explanation for how he himself is able to operate the suit.
I was wondering that when I was watching it again. I'm like, wait, how is he doing this though?
Yeah, like how is he absorbing those impacts when he lands?
They're like, don't worry about that part. Yeah.
It's a cartoon.
Yeah.
This movie is very much a cartoon, and it's wonderful because it's a cartoon. I wrote down the name of all of the kids that he meets in this scene, and I missed Fred the first time, so I just wrote down TJ Miller because, of course, this movie came out in 2014.
Yeah, that was like the height of his like popularity, wasn't it? Yes.
Then I wrote down Wasabi, Angry Girl.
Is Angry Girl Go-Go Tamago?
Yeah.
And Go-Go is played by Jamie Chung, who I know because she was on The Real World, and I used to cover reality TV, and then she went on to do movies and television. Okay. But I didn't recognize the voice when I was listening to it. When I looked it up, I was like, oh, cool, Jamie Chung.
I was going to say Wasabi is Damon Wayans Jr. I did not know that the first time I saw it. I had to look that up.
Yes, and I loved him in New Girl. So as soon as I heard the voice, I was like, yes. And his character is not originally in the comic. They took pieces of other characters to create him and give him his superpowers. Yeah, so Honey Lemon is the chemistry student at San Francisco Institute of Technology, and Honey Lemon is like the mom of the group. She's very warm and caring, enthusiastic, positive, and she has a purse that shoots out different bubbles that do different things. I think in the comic, like, she can pull anything out of the purse, like anything she wants, and that sounds awesome. But in the film, her bubbles do different things, like a sticky bomb or like slime that kind of holds you in place. And so, yeah, that's her thing in the movie.
Definitely, like I would say when I first watched it, I would have called her the cheerleader of the group.
Ooh, yeah.
She's definitely the one encouraging everybody else and like picking everyone else up when they're down. But really, I would say Fred is the cheerleader. So she's more like the caretaker of the group.
Yes. Or the big sister of the group, something like that, right?
I like big sister.
Yeah.
I like big sister of the group. Go-Go is, of course, like the detached rebel sister of the group.
Yeah, exactly. And she specializes in electromagnetics and speed. She's like the speedy one of the group.
Yeah, so I think her and Wasabi are engineers.
Yes, yeah. And I know they were like looking at like her sort of like a New York bike messenger when they were designing it.
Immediately visually drew a parallel to Tron. As soon as I saw her on the bike, it looked like one of the light cycles from Tron. So what do you think of the team as a whole? And what do you think of like their interactions with Hero? When you hear the name of this movie, Big Hero 6, is the first thing that you think of this team of 6 kids?
No, I feel like they should call the movie Big Hero 2, because I feel like it's so much Hero and Baymax. And I don't dislike any, I mean, like I said, Fred is my favorite of the friends. And I like all of them, but I feel like so much of the film is centered around Hero and Baymax that I don't spend a lot of time having an emotional connection to any of them. I enjoy them and they're fine. But like I said, I mean, sometimes it just feels like, Big Hero 2. Do you agree with that, or do you like them?
I agree with your take on it, because at one point, about an hour into the movie, I wrote down, oh, this is Spider-Man still, and we're going to come back to that. I'm going to prove that. But I wrote down about an hour into the movie, oh, this is also Shazam. Are you familiar with Shazam?
I've never seen it, but I know it.
Okay. My knowledge of Shazam, I'm more of a Marvel fan than DC. Maybe we shouldn't even talk about DC on this podcast, but whatever. My knowledge of it comes from the most recent movie, mostly, which was fantastic. I think it's one of the best movies DC has put out in a while. It was really fun. Shazam is a kid. He's a 13-year-old kid. He's the same age as Hero, effectively. He gets chosen to gain the powers of this wizard Shazam. and he could turn into Shazam by saying the word Shazam. Later on in the movie, by the way, huge spoilers for DC's Shazam. Billy Batson is the kid's name. He grows up in foster care, and he gets adopted by this foster family. And later on in the movie, he has, I think it's 6 brothers and sisters, foster brothers and sisters. He ends up sharing his Shazam power with all of them. And each of them has their own sort of unique, specialized talent that they get when they all like split up into different Shazam wizards. Captain Planet.
Yes.
Captain Planet, when Captain Planet's there, they don't, the Planeteers really aren't needed. Like their individual talents don't really add up to
no, they don't.
What Captain Planet can just do on his own. So,
right.
So most situations, even though there's 5 Planeteers, Earth,
Wind, Water, Fire, Heart, go Planet.
Go Planet. But I would argue when Captain Planet shows up, the Planeteers are really just, I think they actually literally give up their power to summon Captain Planet.
They're like, we'll just be over here. Go do your thing.
I think they combine their rings and he sort of just like absorbs it all. And that's how and then their rings are not effective while he's around. But and we're getting very much.
No, but this is actually, no, it's not, because this is actually a really good parallel, because I agree. Like when Hero and especially Baymax, like when Hero and Baymax are doing their thing, you know what I mean? Like they're helpful, but they're not at the forefront of the action necessarily. Don't they all kind of get tossed around by Callahan?
Completely.
Yeah, I was about to say, they don't actually do anything.
I am glad that every single one of them is there. The movie would still be great even if they weren't.
Yeah.
And that might be a controversial take on it, but
I don't disagree with you.
But like I found myself leaning into the movie during the like really emotional scenes between Baymax and Hero. I guess the overall point I'm trying to make with this question, I do think it's great that the other characters are there and how much they support Hero and how he finds a family in them. But I do think the movie itself is mistitled. It's a good title. It's fun to say, but I think it's mistitled. I think it's inaccurate.
I would agree with that totally. And it's nothing against those characters. It's just, like I said, it seems so focused on the others. And I was just so emotionally invested in Hero's story, like right from the beginning. One of my criticisms about it, I just felt like in the beginning, okay, Tadashi's going to die, right? Like, I mean, just the way it was set up, you're like, okay, he's going to die. And either Callahan or Alistair Cray are the bad guy. Like, I know what's going to happen. And yet I still cried like big time twice during the film. I cried early on and then towards the end when they go through the portal together, when Hero and Baymax go through the portal. So even though it was predictable, I still felt super invested. But yeah, those other characters, I feel like they were nice to have, but they didn't exactly, bring tears to my eyes either.
I agree with the word predictable. I think we're on the same wavelength with this. I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing. I think the storytelling of it leaned into some of its predictability, its anticipation of what the audience is going to expect based on superhero culture or like robot or general sci-fi culture and movies they've seen before. And I think it really leaned into that in a smart way in a lot of ways.
Did you know that it was going to be Callahan behind the Kabuki mask, or did you think it was Alistair Cray?
No, I didn't think it was him because he was too obvious. By the time they introduced him, I knew that this movie was operating on, let me try to define the exact wavelength it is. It knows that I know that guy would immediately look like the villain. And and it also knows that I would know that that's too obvious. Right. So it's going to get one step ahead of me by making him not the villain.
Yeah, that's so accurate.
I'm going to take that one step further. The movie also knows that I would know all of that. And so then I would guess, well, who's the least likely to be the villain? And it's Callahan. And then the movie even knows that I'm going to think about that. And then I'm going to think, well, I figured this out, that it's not the first guy. So it's definitely not Callahan. It's got to be someone else. It ends up being Callahan.
Right.
But I do feel like it gives you enough Scooby-Doo extra characters that when the reveal comes, you don't, whatever age you are, you don't feel completely duped. And you also don't feel completely pandered to about like who was the villain the whole time.
Oh, that's a really good point. I would agree with that.
It rides this very thin line.
Yes.
That's hard to ride.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what other movie made me think of this? Just from the title, Detective Pikachu.
I saw Detective Pikachu.
Oh, excellent. When I watched Detective Pikachu, my review of it afterwards, my one sentence review was, for a movie called Detective Pikachu, the mystery was very easy to solve. But that's not even a bad thing about the movie because it's not made for me, 37-year-old who was into Pokemon at age 10. It's made for kids who are age 10 right now who are Pokemon fans. So if a 10-year-old watches that movie and figures it out, like figures out the mystery before they reveal it, that 10-year-old is going to feel like, oh, I'm clever, or like, yeah, this is a great payoff for me.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard to, as an adult, write a mystery or have some sort of reveal in a kid's movie that really nails that.
Well, that's a really good comparison, though. I think that's true for Big Hero 6, too, because if the kid figures it out, they must feel like the smartest person ever. But for us, it's like, I bet it's got to be one or the other, right? So you just flip a coin.
Yeah.
Who is it? He takes the mask off and or whatever. He does like the slowest turnaround ever. And it just zooms in on Callahan. You're like, okay, yeah, I mean, right. Because who else could it be? It's not Wasabi. Like, it's Outcast. Who is it?
This movie, I keep coming back to this. I think it is playing on its audience's meta-knowledge. And this might be a stretch, but are you familiar with Tommy Boy?
Of course. One of the best movies ever. Okay.
What is the company that he's trying to save in Tommy Boy?
Callahan.
Callahan Auto Parts.
Oh, my God. That's so great.
And the ending is almost exactly the same with Rob Lowe's, like, well, he's obviously the villain, but like the way they do the churn and the way that he reveals himself, he exposes himself, it's very, very similar. And I feel like it might be a subtle homage or like a subtle little Easter egg.
I want it to be because Tommy Boy is such a great movie. Let's just pretend like that's what it is.
I was just like, Callahan's Law of Robotics, Callahan Auto Parts. They're really hitting Callahan.
Yeah, they really are.
Oh, one thing I thought was weird. I want to ask you this because maybe I missed something.
Okay.
When Hiro first goes to San Francisco Institute of Technology, his brother says, yeah, you've never seen my lab, but he knows his brother works there. While he's there, he bumps into Dr. Callahan, and he is absolutely shocked that Dr. Callahan owns and operates this lab. How does he not know that?
I don't know. And how has he never
works for?
I know. And how has he never seen the lab? Like, they seem pretty tight. They're in fact so tight that Tadashi knew that Hiro was bot fighting in a random underground club and showed up on a motorcycle to like whisk him away. So if you know that your brother that well, how does your brother never come to your school, even know who your professor is, meet your friends? Like, yeah, okay, I'm with you.
I believe that he's never been to the lab, but I must have missed some detail, but if not, I just can't believe that he doesn't know this much about his brother.
Yeah, no, I don't think they ever really address it. I think it's as random as you're making it right now.
And you know what? I'm not really ready to condemn the movie over just that because the writing in this movie is, I think, just fantastic.
Yes.
All throughout. So many favorite lines. There's a section we're going to get to soon that's coming up, which is what is your favorite moment? And I think that's going to be just me gushing over the writing in this movie and some of the really quotable lines. What are we getting into? Callahan and the predictability of the plot. Yeah, what did they call him? Did he have like a villain name besides Callahan?
No, Man in the Kabuki Mask, right? Why couldn't he have a cool villain name? It's
maybe a missed opportunity because there's so much in this movie that's original and unique, and that's hard to do in an age when we're really saturated, pop culture is really saturated with superheroes in every part of it.
Yeah.
It's really hard to create anything new or iconic. And this movie did that, but I watched it 3 times before I really thought about what is the name of the villain. Oh, it's just Callahan. Maybe Kabuki Man. Maybe they call him Kabuki Man, but I don't know about that.
I don't even think they really ever refer. They just say, like, when Hiro goes to the police station to report him, that's when the policeman's like, a man in a Kabuki mask was chasing or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, that's about it. That's about as close as we get to a name of anything, you know?
Can we go into that scene for a second?
Yeah.
Because that scene is another example of this movie playing with your expectations and the audience's anticipation. And it does that with comedy in that scene. Because there's so much happening. Baymax is low on, his battery is really low. Every time he talks, it sounds like he's drunk. And he's like, at one point he picks up a cat and he's like, Harry, baby.
Yes. Yes, that whole sequence of being in the police station and then Hiro trying to sneak him upstairs is so funny because it really is like you're just trying to sneak your drunk roommate, you know, into your house to crash for the night. And they did such a good job of doing that without kids figuring out what it is, but the adults, I mean, everyone must pick up on that.
That's just one of the layers of it. Another layer is when he starts just casually pulling tape off the roll to put over his wounds. One side starts hissing, and it just keeps happening over and over. It does that thing in comedy where it's like they do it too many times, and then they do it again, and it's funny again.
It was 6 times, 3 times on each arm. It was a
I'm so
lot.
glad you counted.
It was. It was like having your toddler out, and trying to have a normal conversation with somebody, and your toddler's just doing this insane thing in the corner, and you're like, I don't know do I just yell at him, ignore him? What do I do?
Do you have one favorite moment of this movie? This section is favorite moments. So do you have one favorite moment? If not, that's okay. We could talk about all of your favorites.
The end of the movie always gets me when they're in the portal. I have issues with the end of the movie, which is just that, we find out that Callahan is motivated by his daughter's alleged death. And then they save her, and I'm like annoyed about it. I'm not that I'm annoyed that they saved her life, but I'm annoyed because I'm like, Tadashi died and the parents died early in the movie. Like, all these people died. I don't know. Then they saved this daughter. But anyway, in the end, when they're, Hiro and Baymax travel into this portal to find her, and you think Baymax sacrifices himself to save Hiro and the daughter. I don't know. Stuff like that, like whenever someone in any movie, if anyone sacrifices themselves to save other people, like, I'm done. I'll cry about it all day long. It gets me every time. Or just when they choose, the selfless thing. Like in Onward, I literally needed therapy after, like at the end of the movie, when the brother lets his, the older brother have his moment with his dad. I was actually hysterical. Like, I was not okay. And so those moments in movies always get me, I think.
Pixar already did it to me with
Up. I was about to say, because when I saw Up, I was not prepared for the opening sequence because nobody told me in advance. I saw it in the theaters, and I just openly wept in the theater loudly. I was just like, like so loud, crying.
Inside Out.
Oh, Inside Out got me good too.
With Bing Bong.
I also cried at Bing Bong.
With the wheelbarrow going over the ramp, right?
Yes.
Onward, they pulled the trick on me again with the van, and I cried over a van. I cried over the death of a van. Thanks,
cry.
Pixar.
I cried over the van, and I cried at the end when he was looking through the little crack, like just absolutely destroyed, as if we don't know that this is what Pixar does. They always, they introduce, death or loss, which I think is amazing, for kids, and or managing your emotions, coming to terms with your emotions. But it's like, we know that this is what Pixar does, and it gets me every damn time. Every time in that portal, I'm like, he's just gonna fire off his glove, and he's just gonna, like, I'm just hysterical about it.
Some would accuse them of just telling the same story over and over, but they're good at telling that story.
It is such a good story. I know. And some people really criticize Onward, and it's one of my favorite. It might be my favorite Pixar movie, which is saying a lot because I love Up.
Oh.
Do you have a favorite moment from this movie?
I do. Before I get to mine, I want to ask you, because I think you're going to know it as soon as I ask you. What does Baymax say to Hiro in that moment?
Wait, what does he say? I know what Hiro needs to say. I'm satisfied with my level of care, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does Baymax say?
So it's not. I might not be getting the exact timing of the moment right, but it's when he pulls out his chip and he points to it.
Yes. What does
he
say?
Says, Tadashi is here.
Tadashi is here is like, oh my God. Tadashi is here is so, like, what a great line. And especially like when he's saying it earlier in the film, like, Tadashi is here. He's like, no, he's not here. Tadashi is here. And then you see the screen. That is also such a great moment. It's so good.
It's devastating.
Also tears there. And he's just sitting down. I feel like that's such a great moment in the film too, because I feel like that is, really when, I don't know, I just feel like it's such an important healing moment for Hiro to see it. And then we see at the end when Baymax is being rebuilt, we see that same shot of Hiro looking into Baymax and making sure that everything's okay and that, the robot can function and everything. It's such a good moment.
Baymax is instantly one of my favorite cinematic robots of all time.
Me too.
He won me over immediately. And the more I explore like the design of him and like just learn today what you taught me about, that his waddle is deliberately supposed to look like a penguin walking. It's just everything about him is so endearing.
I was gonna say, I have a question for you, because there's one thing that Baymax says in the movie that it really, like, I struggled with it, because what he says is, like, is this what Tadashi would have wanted? And I feel like that is such, like, I mean, don't get me wrong. It got me emotionally, but then I was trying to think about it, like, analytically. And I was thinking, like, that is such a human thing to say. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, is this what is this what your mother would have wanted? Is this what your brother would have wanted? And when he says that, I'm like, where does that fall in his line of programming and knowledge?
I'm so glad you asked me that question, because that is one of the lines I wrote down right underneath Tadashi is here. I wrote that one down, and I think that is my favorite moment of the movie. When he says, "Is this what Tadashi would want?" This goes back to something I was gushing about earlier. Scott Adsett's performance of Baymax, he does everything in this objectively level voice where you can assign your own emotional feeling to it one way or another. You can tip it either way. And this is such a great example of that. I can imagine Baymax is asking this because he genuinely doesn't know. He doesn't understand. Is this something my programming is incomplete, and maybe Tadashi would have wanted this and I don't know. Please, hero, I trust you. So you tell me. You're my programmer now. Which, if it is that really like puts it onto Hero to be like, okay, I have to be the one to do like the teaching. I have to be the parent in this moment.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that. That's just one way it could go. Another way that it could go, again, because the voice acting was so good, is what you said. Is this what Tadashi would want? Like a rhetorical question.
Yeah, and I was really wondering about that, and I never thought about it that way, as if like there's a piece of his programming that he truly doesn't know, and then that's how we, the audience, interpret it, and that's how Hero interprets it. Like, oh, is this what Tadashi would want? Oh, that's so cool. I didn't think about it like that.
I'm not worried about giving this movie too much credit. I think this is another example of the writing being very multi-layered, because I think there's another possibility with that line and the way that Baymax says it, which is that Baymax is aware of how Hero would interpret the question. Well, I guess that's basically the same thing as it being rhetorical.
Yeah, but I do feel like he learned that I do feel like Baymax was developing like artificial intelligence as the movie went along, and he was really learning and changing and growing throughout the film as much as Hero was.
It's, oh my God. So, man, I'm sorry that you may not have context for this, or that I might be spoiling a more than 20-year-old movie for you, but Terminator 2.
Listen, if I haven't seen it by now, you can tell me the plot of the film. Go.
Yeah, I'm not even going to announce at the beginning of this podcast that there's spoilers for Terminator, because I'm just going to assume you've seen it, unless you're Gina, which is okay.
That's fine.
But there is a line in that movie where the robot says to a human, "Now I know why you cry." That's probably a misquote. And that's what this movie has, that moment multiple times.
Yeah.
With, where is Tadashi? Tadashi is here. Is this what Tadashi would want? Baymax is great.
Baymax makes me cry every time. It's not like I just saw it for the first time. I was rewatching it, and it still makes me cry every time.
It's unfair.
Yeah, really, Pixar.
All right, this section is something I think you don't know about this movie.
Something I think you don't know about this movie is that T.J. Miller improvised many of his exclamations in the film, actually.
I did not know that.
Oh, how about something I think you don't know about this movie is that when they're walking through Fred's mansion, on the wall is a family portrait, and the father is Stan Lee.
I did notice that on the third viewing. It took me 3 viewings.
It took you 3 times, but you found Stan Lee.
Yep.
It's not a movie with Marvel in it unless Stan Lee makes an appearance.
Oh, you know why it took me 3? Because I didn't know that this had a post-credit scene. Did you watch the post-credit?
No, there's a post-credit scene? Stop. I always get bored. And this would happen to me at the Marvel movies too. And people are like, how did you not watch the post-credit scene? What happens?
Spoiler for the post-credit scene of Big Hero 6, which we've been talking about for the past hour. It's Fred opens up some secret room in his mansion. It's the ending of Spider-Man 2. Where Harry Osborn opens up a secret room in his mansion.
Yes.
And Stan Lee is, I think it's a hologram of him maybe, but it's him. He left a message for his son. Upgraded superhero gear for Fred.
What? Okay. So,
yeah.
I'm sad I missed that. No, I'm going to go back and watch it now on Disney+. Darn it.
So something I think you don't know about this movie is a lot of the details that they omitted from the comic book, or at least one major one, which was, did you get into who the main villain of Big Hero 6 is in the comic?
Yes, but the Everwraith.
I want to unpack this.
Okay.
I want to talk about this.
I mean, so all I know about him really is that I believe he's like the embodiment of all the people that died in World War II.
He is the embodiment of all of the victims of the Hiroshima bombing.
Okay.
Which, yikes.
Yeah.
Yikes is my hot take on that.
Don't exactly think of that as a comic book character.
I guess
That's pretty dark.
it's super dark, and I feel like it comes from a place. I was thinking about, okay, so this was created in 1998.
Yep.
So a good, 50 years later, it feels like the character was created out of a sense of maybe like residual guilt or
Maybe
something like that. But I didn't learn enough about the character itself or like read full issues or panels with him to really get a sense of how he talks or what he does or anything. But yeah, I just wondered if you had anything to say about that character, because I thought it was just a really interesting villain for the team.
It is. And I was just trying to look up a little bit more about him, right? He's the psychic manifestation. Okay. The astral embodiment. Okay. After the bombings, the souls of those deceased formed into the persona of Everwraith. This apparition was planning revenge against the United States. And then he instead got the idea that causing like more catastrophes would cause the nation to become even more advanced. So he was trying to create more chaos.
Yes. Oh, yes. I did read that detail. That's an interesting bit. He is trying to halt progress and stop like technological advancements. And that's why Big Hero 6, their whole thing
is
technology, engineering, upgrading. And so that he does make sense as a villain. But yeah, that's interesting that's his reason why, is that the end goal is too much technology leads to what's the opposite of enlightenment. But his goal basically is the enlightenment of the species.
And I believe in the comic as well that he kidnaps Hero's mother. And that is what motivates Hero to join Big Hero 6. That he wasn't initially on board, but then obviously when it got personal, he got involved. But I believe in the comics there is no Tadashi, and that the parents didn't die when he was young and things like that. And then looking it up is just interesting that really at the time when it came out, there really wasn't any any backlash or anything about, I mean, not that I can find, nothing where people were super offended by it or had a problem with it or anything like that. Maybe because it lasted for 2.3 seconds and the comic kind of came and went and it was very maybe under the radar. I don't know. But it's a very interesting choice for sure.
Do you think the writers avoided using this character as the villain in the movie for sensitive reasons? Maybe like this is too dark of a character for a kid's movie, or is it because like they didn't want it to be obvious that or they didn't want like anybody with meta knowledge to know who the villain would be?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's probably both of those things, but I would think that they would feel that it's just too complicated, for kids to understand. And I feel like if they had made anime version of it, an anime movie that's, kind of geared more towards adults, that might be a different story. And then we could see the Everwraith, show up as a villain. But, the fact that they chose Disney, Pixar, but I was just thinking about, I don't know, I don't watch a whole lot of anime, but just, watching my favorite, which is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, which is really dark and deals with a lot of serious things. I could see the Everwraith being in an anime version of this.
Yeah, that's a good take. I could also see Everwraith being an adult anime version, but definitely not in if Disney ever makes a sequel.
I don't think we'll be seeing
Big Hero
Everwraith.
6. I doubt we'll see
I don't think
Everwraith.
so. I don't think we'll be like franchising out as toys and kids will be playing with it in their living rooms. Probably not so much.
He kidnaps Hero's mom and uses some sort of illusion, some sort of trickery to make him think that he killed her, but didn't actually kill her.
Right.
Which I feel like they maybe sort of recycled part of that storyline for Callahan's daughter. He thought she was killed and
oh, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so you could see that they took pieces of the story, the things that they left out. And if I feel like that's pretty cool though. If you know the comic, and you're watching the film, you're like, oh, okay, I see pieces of this and that and the other thing as you're watching it.
Now, that brings me to one of my points that I said that I was going to circle back to earlier, which is Big Hero 6 is Spider-Man, and I'm going to prove it.
Yes, I've been waiting for this.
Okay.
Go.
I'm going to describe a superhero story, and I'm going to ask you to tell me what superhero I'm describing.
Oh God. What are my choices?
Okay.
Are my choices?
I'm yes. Okay. Yeah. So it's
We're
Spider-Man
playing a game
or
called
Hero.
Spider-Man or Hero. Da 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 da.
Yeah.
Okay.
Spider-Man or Hero.
Oh God. Or okay. Can the answer be both?
That's the spoiler.
Damn it. Okay, go.
But this movie knows it plays with expectations and obvious reveals, and so does this podcast.
Great. Let's play Spider-Man or Hero.
Let's play America's favorite game show. Let's play San Francisco's favorite game show, Spider-Man or Hero.
I'm ready.
Okay. Parents died tragically when he was young.
Both.
Lives with his aunt.
Both.
Had a male father figure to look up to, who tragically dies early on, and he blames himself for his death.
Both. I see where this is going.
Participates in underground illegal gambling on underground fights.
Both.
Okay.
You did it.
A genius scientist steals one of his designs and uses it to terrorize the city.
Oh no, it really is Spider-Man.
It really is Spider-Man. But again, I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, not at all.
I think
that is so funny.
If anything, another movie Marvel released recently, Into the Spider-Verse, proved that if you have a really good story and you tell it well, it's the telling that we show up for.
That's true. That's true. They are the same movie, though. Oh my God!
All right, so we went through what is these are the questions that we've answered on this podcast today.
Yes. What
is a robot? Mm-hmm. What is a dinosaur? Mm-hmm. Gina, what is your favorite moment of this movie? What is my personal favorite moment of this movie? We've also gone over what is something that I think you don't know about this movie, and we both came up with some cool things. Yeah. So that brings us to the sort of the conclusion, or the conclusion that we're going to draw. Does this movie make robots look cool or lame or something in between?
No, it makes robots look cool. I mean, even the microbots are awesome. I don't want them in my life, but they're awesome. And Baymax is phenomenal. Like I would buy a Baymax tomorrow. So it's a point for robots.
So let's say you had your doctor like sends you get that like postcard from the doctor that your annual checkup is coming up. You get to the office. I'm assuming this is, after COVID. Yeah. And you can actually go to a doctor's office.
I can go to the office where I am. So sure, I go to the office.
Okay, cool. So so you go to the office and when you walk into the doctor's office, a inflatable vinyl exoskeleton just stands up from the corner and approaches you. You're going to be like, I'm immediately on board with this.
No, I would certainly have. Okay, that's fine. All right, this is a fair point. All right. This is a fair point. I would not immediately be on board with this. If I walked in and had no previous knowledge, I didn't know it was actually Baymax from Big Hero 6. Yeah, sure. I'd be super unnerved if this thing just inflated in front of me. Maybe it's just the pandemic talking, but like I want a Baymax in my house so badly just to like look after me and take care of me. But I mean, I think my first impression would probably be to run out of the room, I think.
I think they did a really solid job of making Baymax look cool, but simultaneously what he was designed for, which is to be approachable. Mm-hmm. And that's, again, a really, really delicate line to ride. Mm-hmm. And they did it.
Absolutely.
So I agree that this movie makes robots look really cool. Even the evil... they're not evil inherently. They're being used for evil.
Ooh, yeah.
Which is a very important distinction. Nanobots.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I called them nanobots. Is it nanobots or microbots?
I think it's microbots.
Microbots.
Nanobots like what is nanobots? Is that what is that?
Nanobots are in a lot of science fiction.
Is it nanobots?
Nanobots are like microscopic almost versions of the microbots that we saw in this movie, where in a lot of sci-fi they're injected into your bloodstream to look for a disease, increase your white blood cells, or they always start to self-replicate and then like take over your brain. So
what else would you expect? Yeah. It is microbots in Big Hero 6.
But yeah, they definitely look cool, and the things that they can do are really cool.
Absolutely.
So I think this movie is a +1 for robots. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
You agree?
100%.
Excellent. That is something that we're going to be tracking with every episode of the podcast. We are always going to tally up at the end. Does this movie get a +1 or a -1 for the dinosaur robot that it features? And some movies are going to feature both, so that's going to be interesting.
That is interesting.
But this one had a very clear winner.
Oh, yeah.
Which was robots.
Absolutely.
Okay. I have 2 bonus questions for you.
Oh.
One is I'm a full adult, but I am a candy fiend. And when I watch movies is usually like when I start digging in on the snacks. Are you a snack person when you watch movies? And if so, what snacks did you eat while watching Big Hero 6?
I've been known to drive to the movie theater just to buy a bucket of popcorn and take it home. So just walk in. I'm like, I'm not here to see a film. I'm just here for the popcorn. They're like, that'll be $12. Like, thank you. Have a lovely evening, sir. And then leave. Mm-hmm. So I always need to have popcorn. And I like to have a little bit of chocolate with it. If I'm in the movie theater, like snow caps all the way. I don't know what it is about snow caps. I really enjoy them. I'm like an 85 85-year-old woman. Me and my
Snow
non-pareils, or whatever. But I also enjoy
A
Reese's.
Necco, do you like Necco wafers?
I know. A Tootsie Roll? I don't know. Like, I don't know what I'm thinking, but I don't know what it is. Snow caps and popcorn together, if you get them in like the same bite, every time in the theater. I miss going to
That
the
does
theater.
sound good. I like to mix M&Ms and popcorn, so I
That's
definitely
a good
get
call.
the Snow
That's a good
Caps
call.
popcorn. It's I just miss the experience of it. You know what I really miss is being home all day. I have so many opportunities to watch TV and movies. There's the whole thing of like going in and turning off your phone, and you're deciding, nothing is going to distract me for the next few hours. I'm just in the dark with a sound system, and I'm just focused on this. I'm not going to check my notifications during a slow part or something.
100%. And I have the attention span of a goldfish. So like if I try to watch something at home, it's over. And I feel like even with everything going on, I'm almost busier at home now than I was before. And I do miss going and just, sitting in the dark, especially the theaters that have the recliners and like the assigned seating. Like, I really miss it. There was a rumor that they were going to bring back theaters and it was going to kind of look like the Senate in the Star Wars movies where everybody was like in their own pod. I'm like, I would do that. First of all, that sounds awesome. But I just miss going to the theater. It's nice to just spend some time today talking about a film because I feel like, I don't know, I don't even know the last time I did that.
Awesome. I'm glad.
Well, what did you eat when you watch movies in the theater?
Well, movies in the theater, always popcorn. Always get the $12 popcorn. Or actually, I was a Regal, I think it was called the Crown Club member.
Oh, you're so fancy. Flash that membership card.
I was on the A-list, I think, for the other one, the Stubbs A-list. So I got good discounts on the popcorn and got a lot of free popcorn.
Oh, damn, I'm jealous.
For this movie, though, because I was watching it at home, this movie is a ambiguously international film. We don't know where San Francisco is exactly, but it's somewhere international. So I went with Australian licorice.
Really?
I've never had the texture of an Australian licorice.
Wow, that's so
good.
random.
The difference is the texture, not the flavor.
Where does one acquire Australian licorice?
Like any grocery store that sells candy or like pharmacy that sells candy. Yeah.
What is the difference? I want to know.
It's the texture. It's like the thickness and the chewiness of it. It's the superior licorice. The Australians know what they're doing with licorice.
That's good to know.
And the other question is this. I cannot claim that this is an original idea that I had, but I don't know where I got it from. Okay. And at some point, some listener is going to hear this question and they're going to know where I quote unquote stole it from.
Tell us.
And they're going to finally tell me, and it's going to help me sleep at night.
Great.
But until then, I'm just going to ask it because I think it's such a fun question.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I think so.
My other bonus question. Would this movie be improved if the two leads were replaced by Danny DeVito and Whoopi Goldberg? So the first part of that is we need to decide who are the two leads. I would argue Baymax and Hero. I think
of course.
That's the okay. So good. We're on the same page with that. Yeah, for sure. So now we need to decide which one is played by Danny DeVito, which one is played by Whoopi Goldberg, and does that improve the movie?
I think that doesn't Danny DeVito have to play Hero? I mean, I want him to be Baymax, but I do like so much. I want Danny DeVito to be Baymax, but I feel like Whoopi Goldberg is a more even-keeled person and therefore is probably more well-suited to give me the even Baymax lines.
Yeah.
Can Danny DeVito play both parts?
And then Whoopi Goldberg would be maybe Aunt Cass.
Yeah.
Does this recasting improve the movie in any way?
No, but I would really enjoy it if that was the case. If I could just watch Danny DeVito play that sounds awesome. I would definitely watch it. But would it make it a better movie? Considering it won the Oscar for Best Animated Picture, I'm pretty sure not. I don't think we can improve on Best Animated Picture. When the Academy was watching, they're like, you know what would really make this movie better? What? Danny DeVito. Yes. That guy.
They're all like,
give this man $1 million.
They're voting on it. One guy's like, it's close. It's so close.
It's so close.
It's just missing that X factor, that one thing. My favorite movie that I've ever asked this question about, and I don't think I'll ever be able to justify reviewing it on this podcast, is Face Off with John Travolta and Nick Cage.
Yes.
It's already perfect. The casting is already perfect, but my goodness, Whoopi Goldberg and Danny DeVito in Face Off.
What if we did the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson, but Danny DeVito was her?
100%. I'm on board. I'm on board if Danny DeVito is her.
Let's do a reboot of it right now. Let's go.
Her is not a movie that I've thought about in the context of this podcast.
That would be a good episode.
Mentioned it. That's a great movie to review in the context. My first question: what is a robot?
Absolutely. That is such good.
Her basically doesn't have a physical body at all.
No.
And that's interesting. And it's still, no spoilers for the future hypothetical.
Yeah. Make that episode
of her. Awesome. Yeah. Maybe I'll be able to invite you back as a
repeat guest,
future co-host sometime, and maybe we'll review her. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Awesome, Gina. All right, everybody, this was our Big Hero 6 episode of Robots versus Dinosaurs with my very, very special co-host, voiceover artist, Gina Scarpa. Thank you for being on today, Gina.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.
Gina, do you have anything that you'd like to plug or promote?
I mean, you could go to my website, which is voiceoversbygina.com, and on Twitter, it's @Gina Scarpa. I just had a national campaign with VSP, Vision Insurance, out, and I'm about to record a new project with L'Oreal, which I'm really, really excited about.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you. And seriously, thank you for coming on today.
No, this was great. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited I got to be on the first episode and we got to talk about one of my favorite movies.
Yay.